Hey y'all, it's just me and Sabu, and today we're going to talk about holding Sabu. No, we're going to talk about holding space, which is a term that everyone's kind of sick of hearing about. Nobody wants to hear about anymore. You may have never heard it before. You may say, that sounds like some kind of new agey weird stuff or some psychology stuff. It's more psychology stuff than anything else, but let's talk about what holding space actually is before Sabu claws my face off. You want to get down? You want to hang out? Okay, so what is holding space actually? Holding space is giving someone the room, the time, the space in time to share their story, to share their feelings. I don't know if you're anything like me. You might be if you're watching this, but sometimes you have a hard time expressing your feelings or even recognizing what they are. Sometimes something really awful will have just happened or something really awful is continuing to happen and the person's just getting overwhelmed, or you're feeling overwhelmed and you're wondering, I don't even know how to express this to another person, but I know that I need to. So therapists, spiritual directors, peer counselors, suicide hotline people, like all of these folks are trained in active listening. And part of active listening is holding space, allowing silence to come into the conversation so that the person who's talking to you has a chance to sort out how they want to express what they need to express. And we're all really bad at doing that. It is fair to say that in our daily lives, we don't know how to do that with the people we're closest to, with our friends. And to be fair, with your friends, your coworkers, your family, you're not a trained therapist. You're not paid to sit there for an hour and listen to somebody just vent without being interrupted by you. However, I am going to say that it is a heck of a lot more useful, more loving, dare I say more Christ-like, to just be quiet for a little bit and let somebody awkwardly talk about what they're talking about. Even if it's infuriating, even if they're a perpetual victim, though we'll get to that in a minute. But let me try not to get totally off topic. So where this is coming from, let's just focus on a couple of girlfriends who have recently had fairly traumatic things happen to them. I mean trauma, like really traumatic, not, oh my God, a nail broke and I couldn't get into the Snapple machine and it stole my dollar and I didn't have a Snapple and Starbucks's drive-through line. Like, that's not trauma, that's annoyance, and it can compound and it can make your day feel icky and awful. You'll still have adrenaline rushing because we're human beings and we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers anymore, but we're having these things where we're just like, and it feels traumatic, but it's not trauma. It's not actually going to leave a lasting impression on your brain unless every single day of your life was like that, and it's not. You think it might be at this moment while you're feeling cruddy, but it's not. Even then, I'm going to hold space for you to just vent for like 15 minutes, cone of no judgment. You get to talk and wow, that sounds like a really crappy day. My goodness, I hate when that happens to me too. Then we move on. This is not that. This is someone's car getting broken into, someone's home getting broken into, someone's windows being smashed at their business. Nobody on camera, police don't have any leads, they can't help you. Someone having life-changing surgery that they didn't want, but they have to have it because if they don't, they could have either continue to have a really horrific medical problem or, it's something like cancer. And if they don't have the surgery, the consequences could be quite dire, right? So trauma, like trauma where it's like, if we don't remove your leg, Mr. So-and-so, the gangrene from your lack of circulation in your leg is going to kill you eventually. Like that kind of trauma, okay? So content warning. Actual like trauma where it's not a usual thing that happens to people every single day. It may happen to people every single day in every big city in the world, but it doesn't happen to most people every single day of their life, right? Like, yeah, the oncology doctor has heard this story every single day, but this is your life. This is you dealing with your stuff right now. And it sucks, and you just need someone to listen to you. Or you need to be the person listening to them. So we're gonna hold space for that person, which means, it doesn't mean giving advice. It doesn't mean popping off on Facebook and going, wow, that sucks, sounds so awful for you. But remember, other people have it worse. Or, oh, that happened to me, and this is what I did. Or that happened to my great aunt Matilda, and this is what she did. I'm so sorry I'm here for you if you need anything. That's if it's on Facebook, Twitter. If people are posting stuff like that on Facebook and Twitter, which they do now, this is just life. It's kind of, I think, a way for most people to say, I'm not in a good space right now. So maybe like your horrific memes are not going to cheer me up like they normally do. Please don't be offended if I don't like all of them. You know, like we have like all these weird social obligations now, especially women. We feel like we have to accommodate everybody. So sometimes we'll just post like a gloss over of the trauma on Facebook, or some people post very detailed explanations of the trauma, as you well know, because you've seen it yourself. Oh, wow, okay, and you're not entirely sure how to respond. I'm so sorry that's happening. Please let me know if you need anything, which sounds trite, but it's better than the list of things to do, okay? So some of us, I think we've all done this at least once in our lives, some of us more than others, depending on our knowledge base. We'll see somebody post something and it's like, oh, I know how to solve that problem. They're not looking for you to solve their problem unless the post starts with, or the conversation starts with, I need your help, or I need some advice, or does anybody know how to, okay? That's when you start rattling off some advice. Before that, let's not. Let's just refrain. Let's just take that breath. Just sit back. Holy Spirit, help me out here. And the Holy Spirit's going to go, shh. Let's acknowledge that this person's in pain. If we know them well, maybe we'll text them, call them. Don't text before you call, because I prefer text before anyone calls me. Don't give the list. Don't give the, oh, that happened to me, and. Don't give the, oh, that happened to my great Aunt Matilda, and. Don't give the, oh, that's so awful that happened to you. However, don't, the moment that you start with empathy, sympathy, and then go, however, you have become, there's a Reddit thing, you can look it up if you want, called AITA, am I the, and usually the person is, or they're being like passive aggressively complaining about a crazy situation in their lives, or they've got Stockholm syndrome and their horrible abusive spouse has convinced them that they are the A and they're not the A. They're the V, the victim, and they need to get the heck out. But what I'm saying here is that if you're asking yourself, if I put a however, am I the A? You are. So bless your heart, stop. Bless it. But stop you. Stop yourself. Okay, so listen in silence. Look at the Facebook post, move on with your life, text them. If you know them well, hey, is there anything I could do? Words are cheap, but if I'm here to help if you need anything. If the person then says, hey, that's right, you work for the police department, how do I file a report? Or, hey, you know an attorney, do you think they'd be able to advise me? Or, hey, isn't your sister a doctor? Or aren't you one? Or, you know, like, so that's one thing, okay? But if they don't, they just want to vent. And let's be honest, most of us don't have time to listen to people vent, but you know what you also don't have time to do? Pop off and comment. So just don't. Like, either just let the person text you repeatedly and then you respond when you feel like they're done or they're ready, or if you're very close, because these days it's kind of a thing, and they need to call you, let them call you and just sit there and listen. People hate silence because they feel like it's awkward, but honestly, think about the last time you really felt like someone was listening to you and how much you appreciated that person. And I'm not saying this is like trying to make better friends with people, because if you're holding space for somebody, you are already probably pretty good friends or family members, because otherwise why would you even be holding space for like a stranger online? Maybe you're like that, and that's great. That is a whole other realm of interaction, and we can talk about that another time. But in this instance, you know the person, you feel compelled to say something to them, or you don't know them very well, but you feel compelled to say something to them, in which case we've already gone past that. This is someone you actually know now, okay? If it's just a random Facebook, Twitter post, whatever, Instagram, of like their smashed in car or whatever, or their hospital lights, the little panel that's next to you when you're in the hospital and it's like giving your vitals, and then they're like, oh, here I am, you know. I did that when I had my gallbladder emergency surgery. I was like, here's where I'm spending the night, and people are like, oh damn, you know, just so they would understand why I wasn't at work. I'd already let my boss know, but you know, why they couldn't get a hold of me, it's because I was, you know, gonna have surgery pretty soon. So in person, when I've been in a group of people and someone shares something kind of traumatic, and yeah, it's not really the vibe of the room, like everyone's just having a good time, and someone all of a sudden just starts trauma dumping, And that's hard, and that can be manipulative too. That can be like a person's way of getting attention in the room and controlling the room. But sometimes it really is just genuinely trauma dumping, and we're not going to worry about like manipulative weird stuff. If you just give that person a few minutes of silence to just share their thing and not give them advice, it's usually over, and that's all they kind of needed. But back to the thing. So if you can remember a time when, whether it was therapy or a friend or a priest or a sister or a biological sister or anybody, a stranger. I've had complete strangers in Starbucks like change my entire day. You know, it's been, I'll tell that story one day, but it was so cool. And I deserve to be beautifully yelled at, shall we say. But I wasn't being a jerk in Starbucks. I was just clearly like in distress at Starbucks, which is like, I am so stoic in public usually. I was having that bad. I've also had a breakdown at Trader Joe's. So I had two very public things happen in retail spaces that that usually involve food or coffee, that I'm not very proud of. But one was handled very well and one was handled incredibly poorly. So we'll talk about that another time, because it just does not paint me in a great light, but it paints these people in as good a light. One is clearly was sent to me by the Holy Spirit. The other one was just doing his best. But in this case, be the person that was sent by the Holy Spirit. Allow the silence to be there. And you can even say, like, especially if it is, for example, trauma dumping at a party or another type of gathering where it's not really appropriate to trauma dump, you can say, you know what, let's give you 10 uninterrupted minutes, just talk. And sometimes that person, if they are manipulative, will be like, oh, never mind, it's okay, you know, because they realize now that there will be a limit to the allowance. But if there really is something horrific going on, they'll be grateful, and they might only take 5 to just say the thing, to cry, to get the hug, to move on. But don't say anything, because I promise you, if you start giving advice that's not been asked for, if you start telling your own story, it's gonna go on. It's gonna get worse, because that person's gonna feel resentful, and they're going to be upset, and they're going to feel unheard, and they're going to be sadder, and it's going to be more traumatizing. So just let the silence be. It will feel awkward, but when you are deeply listened to, it's easier to let it go, and it's also easier to solve your own problem. Like, sometimes just hearing yourself say the thing, you hear the solution. Like, yes, this is going to be a life-changing surgery, but if I don't do it, if I don't lose a leg, if I don't lose this organ, if I don't address this situation, if I don't call my insurance company, if I don't make a police report, if I don't call the perpetrator's insurance company, like whatever the thing is, if I just panic and freak out and don't do that step, it will actually be worse. And just let them hear that. You don't have to say any of those things to them. They'll hear themselves say it usually. And if they don't at the end and they're like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Then you say, would you like for me to share my experience, or would you like for me to list some possible steps? Because I don't know. I don't know what the situation would be. Maybe we can Google together. Maybe I can ask somebody who I think would know. And I've done that. I had a friend contact me who texted me while I was in the middle of something else. So I felt really bad. I didn't get back to her for 45 minutes, which I shouldn't have felt bad, because she didn't know that I was in a meeting, and I didn't know that she was in distress, because I turn my phone off when I'm giving time, my holding space for other people that I previously agreed to hold space for. So I said, I'm so sorry. I was doing something else, but I'm going to drive home now. Do you want me to call you on my way home? We can talk for the 15 minutes. It's going to take me 20 minutes to get home. She said, yes, please. And she talked, and she cried, and she talked some more, and she yelled, and she cried. And she said, what do you think? And I said, well, I've just gotten home. Let me turn off the car, get upstairs, and I'll do some thinking. And actually, is it okay if I ask some people I know who might know more about your situation? It was kind of like a civil/criminal thing going on at her house. So I wanted to consult a police officer that I knew, and also an attorney that I knew. And the attorney actually ended up pointing out that it was in fact a civil issue. No idea why someone made a police report. And then gave me some ideas that I shared with her. And lo and behold, one of those ideas that the attorney gave me ended up being the solution. So me giving her space and then asking her for the space to see if I could get some expert advice ended up relatively quickly resolving a problem that to her seemed insurmountable. But I did give her the space to talk about it first, so I could get all the information. I could hear, she could release her emotions. She could get into a place where she could have rational thought about it. And that's the key. You're holding space because they need to purge the emotions to get to the place where they can think about the solution or accept the reality of the situation. Easier said than done. But again, it's not your job to fix it. It's not your job to teach them. It's your job to hold this space. And you can be honest about how much space you have to hold. I can listen for 5 minutes. Let me have it. I can listen for 15 minutes. I'll give you an hour. Hey, can we have lunch tomorrow? Talk to me all about it. Hey, do you want to just come to the house right now? And you can, or you don't feel safe, come sleep over. You know, whatever the thing is that you can do, just hold the space. Sometimes it's a physical space and sometimes it's a mental space. So to conclude, like, just give the space. And I'll tell you a funny story. So I have a friend at work who seemed like a really good listener, and probably is actually, because he doesn't react really. He holds space. What I found out recently is that when he didn't know what to say, he would let the Microsoft Teams AI choose the appropriate response to the thing that I had just said. So I said to him, great. 50% of our friendship, my friendship with you is with the Microsoft Teams AI. Just giving me great responses like, wow, or, oh, wow. Or like, wow, that sounds hard. But that's what I'm saying. Sometimes just like the prompt to say more is more healing than just coming up with things that you feel like you need to say. And the first person who would admit that they're not the most empathetic, they're very, very logical and rational. And they know that about themselves. So when the AI would suggest a more gentle kind of empathetic response, they would use that instead. And I think that in and of itself is a choice, and it's a very compassionate choice, even if it's, you know, I'm basically having a conversation with an AI, but that's fine. It ended up, it has solved a lot of problems where it's like, oh, okay, I feel heard. I now understand how to handle this particularly stressful situation, and I'm gonna go handle it now. And it wasn't even my friend's brain. It was just him making choices, clicking on stuff, which is fine. So where am I going with this? In the case of us listening, loving our friends, praying for them, being with them in their pain, we let the Holy Spirit take over. The Holy Spirit's not going to press AI buttons for you, unfortunately, but if you really let the Holy Spirit into the conversation, a lot of the time you're going to hear, shh, just let them talk. Just let them talk. Obviously, if you're in a situation where you're being paid to give advice, if you're a realtor and you're saying, I don't think you should get this house because there's this, and this, like that's a whole other thing. Or you're the doctor and you're saying, well, your options are surgery. We could do chemo, we could do radiation, but I think in your case, and then they give their opinion, that's a whole other thing, right? But when you're just a friend or a family member listening, or a stranger listening, just hold the space. That's it. No one is requiring anything more of you. So just do that. Just do that. That's fine. It's good. It is, what is it that Christ said? You will be given, no. Christ said none of those things. Do not prepare your defense ahead of time. The Holy Spirit will give you the words. I'm paraphrasing. Obviously you're not defending yourself when you're just holding space for someone, but it's true when you're just listening to someone as well. And when you're just listening to someone, you don't listen with your mouth. You listen up here. This is what you're listening with. So do that. Don't post love and light. Don't do that. Don't be that person who's like good vibes only when someone is suffering. There's nothing wrong with good vibes. But when someone is suffering, don't say like, oh, you know, it could be worse because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I told in a group text, my girlfriends, those love and light folks, bless them, but they're all like one Xanax away from slapping a cashier. I'm sorry, love and light people, but I feel like you keep repeating that mantra to people when they're suffering, not because you think they need to hear it, but because you need to tell yourself that all the time because you're on the verge constantly. And I get it. I'm like a very high key person. I get on the verge frequently. but I also let the spirit inform how I interact with other humans. I'm gonna let you go now, because so you can go practice holding space for other people if you need to. And I pray for you that the next time someone needs to just share something painful, that you're able to just give them the space to do it. And I also pray that someone blesses you with holding space for you, because it's so important for personal growth, for feeling loved, for feeling like we live in a society. Hashtag we live in a society. All right, everybody. God bless. And I will see you soonish. I hope with something a little bit more lighthearted and hopefully maybe a little funnier as well. All right. Bye.